Hello everyone, welcome back to Did You Know? Today we'll be discussing two different housing acts. The California Housing Act, also known as the Rumford Act, signed in 1963, and the National Fair Housing Act, signed in 1968 by Lyndon B. Johnson. These two housing acts were pivotal in making housing accessible to all, regardless of race, religion, sexual orientation, or disability. It also helped many Black families take further steps to finally obtaining their dreams of homeownership, while facing unjust discrimination and predatory lending practices. Before we get started, if you're strapped for time, you can always check out our website, where we have all of our videos. Here to help me is Kayleen Carter, who will be talking to you about the Rumford Act. Without further ado, let's get into it.
Thanks, Ashley. The Rumford Act, or Assembly Bill 1240, was authored by William Byron Rumford, the first Black person to be elected to the state assembly in California. It helped to protect the rights of Blacks and other people of color to purchase housing without being subject to discrimination. It stalled in the Senate for about 3 months before finally being signed into law. It enabled the state's Fair Employment Practices Commission to intervene on behalf of tenants. If a manager or homeowner was found to have refused rental or sale of a home due to race, the Fair Employment Practices Commission, in some cases, could force them to rent or sell to the potential tenants or buyers in question. The Rumford Act was only around for little more than a year before it was eventually challenged and repealed by Proposition 14 in 1964. Prop 14 was spearheaded by the California Real Estate Association with the help of the California Apartment Owners Association. Together, the two organizations formed the Committee for Home Protection and crafted Prop 14, which allowed discrimination in the sale of public housing, apartment rentals, and housing development. The motivation behind the initiative coincided with property rights. Many believe they shouldn't be told what to do with their own property. And when Proposition 14 was approved in November 1964, those who used racial discrimination in the selling or leasing of homes had the force of constitutional law behind them. Thankfully, Prop 14 was ruled unconstitutional in 1966, and the California Supreme Court restored the Rumford Act. Now that you know about the Rumford Act, let's talk about the Fair Housing Act. Ashley?
Thanks, Kayleen. Actually, did you know that CalHFA provided financing on a multifamily property that was named after William Rumford in Berkeley? Now, back to the National Fair Housing Act. Let's fast forward to 1968. The civil unrest in the United States is at a boiling point, spurred on by voter suppression, inadequate housing, an education gap, as well as the assassination of civil rights leader Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. All this unrest led to rioting and violence breaking out on the streets of Black neighborhoods as a response to worsening conditions. A year before the Fair Housing Act was signed, Lyndon B. Johnson greenlit the Kerner Commission, which investigated the reasons behind the violent riots that occurred in 1967 in Detroit, Newark, and other cities. Initially, many people thought the violence was due to outside agitators, such as gang members. However, the Kerner Commission found the reason behind all the violence was due to long-standing racism by the white community towards the Black community. The report advised the government to invest in programs that integrated the Black community into society outside of the ghetto. However, Johnson's administration would not allocate resources from the Vietnam War to social reform to remedy racial inequities. So, while the federal government was unable to integrate the communities, there were many individuals who advocated for equality. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was one of them. He was a strong advocate of fair housing. King co-led the Chicago Freedom Movement from 1965 to 1966, an organization that advocated for open housing by organizing tenant unions and also marching through predominantly white neighborhoods. King and the Chicago Freedom Movement were able to get Chicago Housing Authority to build public housing in white middle-class areas. The Mortgage Bankers Association also promised to stop discriminatory lending practices. And then on April 4th, King was assassinated, which fueled a massive wave of riots known as the King Riots. These riots led Johnson to push for the Fair Housing Act to be signed, which was then signed a week later on April 11th. Since that signing, the National Fair Housing Act has prohibited discrimination concerning the sale, rental, and financing of housing based on race, national origin, religion, and sex. Though not perfect, the Fair Housing Act became a federal law to help Black home buyers. CalHFA has programs to address the housing needs for low and moderate income Californians. We believe that all Californians should have a place to call home. That's why we're here to help the underserved communities open those doors to homeownership. Please be sure to check out our other videos if you would like to learn more. Take care.